These ultra rare bottles are fantastic, but realistically, who can afford to drink this crap? I can't. So let's get real for a minute and talk about bourbon you can actually afford to drink. My favorite cheap sipper, Wild Turkey 101. It's everything you love about Wild Turkey with a higher proof point. This guy around here is about $25-ish, depending on where you pick it up. And it's got that pleasant Wild Turkey taste, a nice oakiness on the finish, great balance and complexity. Overall, a really good whiskey for $25. Next is just a good old easy sipper in Old Forester 86 proof. So if you're not into high proof whiskey like I am, this is probably something you need to give a try. Old Forester doesn't put their name on a bad whiskey. And that shows with this 86 proof. Now I tend to prefer the 100 proof counterpart to this guy, but I don't have that one on the bar right now. So we chose the 86 proof for this video. And honestly, it's a good change of pace for a lot of these 100 and 101 proofs that we're gonna have on this list. The next cheap whiskey you need to try is Benchmark. Now there's a lot of different benchmarks. I'm not talking about Benchmark 8. We're talking about the Benchmark Bonded, Top Floor, Full Proof, some of these more limited releases or new releases from Benchmark. Made by Buffalo Trace. They have a great sweetness to them. This Bonded right here has an interesting vanilla kind of toasted note to it. And I absolutely love this whiskey for right around $20. And the next cheap whiskey you need to try is good old Buffalo Trace. This guy checks in at 90 proof and it's roughly $20 to $25 around here when you can find it. I think it may be getting slightly more expensive, but definitely under $30 if you find this guy close to MSRP. It's got that great Buffalo Trace sweetness, like really bright red fruit, almost like crisp apple flavor to it. And man, goes down so easy. We go through an awful lot of ancient age 10 star here at my bar. Again, 90 proof, made by Buffalo Trace, very similar in flavor profile to the Buffalo Trace bottle we just talked about. Not quite the depth of flavors, they're not quite as crisp and bright. This one actually comes across a little more muted than Buffalo Trace, but it is still an extremely delicious whiskey. And this big old boy right here only cost me like 23 bucks. This is the final Buffalo Trace product on this list. This is Weller Special Reserve. Now this one is going to be a little harder to come by. You're not going to be able to find this everywhere. But realistically, when you do, it's $20-ish or so, unless somebody's got it really marked up. This is a wheated bourbon, so it's gonna have a lot of wheat. You know, obviously, corn is the primary ingredient on the mash bill, but the second most prominent grain being wheat. And I am a huge fan of the Weller lineup. Now, this is my least favorite out of all the Wellers, but at the price point, if you can get it, it's still freaking delicious. Now that we're done with all that Buffalo Tracedness, let's look at good old Elijah Craig small batch. 94 proof. You can usually find these at $25 to $30, although I think I probably paid just slightly above that for this one because I was having a hard time finding one. Really a good change of pace from that Buffalo Trace. And that brings me to the best bottle of whiskey, in my opinion, that I can get in the state of Alabama for under $20. And that's Evan Williams Bottle and Bond. It is just 100 proof deliciousness at like $17 or $18. And it's just hard to imagine a 4-year-old bourbon, 100 proof for 17 bucks, especially one that's as good as this is. Hard to beat that at the price point. We're actually gonna finish this out with several Bottle and Bonds. I tend to like higher proof. Bottle and Bond bumps up that proof point to 100, and so you can see why I tend to gravitate toward those when we're talking about cheaper whiskey. Now this Early Times recently was sold from one manufacturer to another. So this used to be owned by Brown-Forman, and now it's being produced by Sazerac that owns like Buffalo Trace and all of those brands. In my test from the bottles I had before to this one, it's not quite as good as the older bottle that I have, but that doesn't mean it's still not delicious. Oh, that's a mighty nice pour for about $25. And now we're gonna jump into a few bottles you may or may not have heard of, a little more obscure bourbon for folks that are especially just getting into it. And this is J.W. Dant 100 proof. Again, another Bottle and Bond. I think the MSRP on these guys are like 15 bucks. I see them marked up occasionally to 20 or 25, depending on where you're shopping. Regardless, still a very impressive sub $30 bottle in bond, 100 proof, 4 years old. So not as complex as some of the other ones we've talked about previously, but still a really pleasant pour, especially if you could get it at that $15 price point. So this very old Barton is not bottle in bond, but it is 100 proof, which to me is really where the range of good whiskey tends to start. At least good, neat sipping whiskey. There are some exceptions, and I gave you a few, but 100 proof plus is where I like to be. Now I see these guys at like 17, 18 bucks up to 25-ish dollars. Now it does make a difference if you can find the 100 proof. There's a 90 proof version that looks very much like this, not near as good as what's in this bottle right here. Old Granddad Bonded, another 100 proof, at least 4 years old. It comes in a liter, so you get a little extra whiskey for your money here. Now this guy can run 25 to 30-ish dollars. I think I paid just a little over 30 for this one, because they don't sell it around here. When I saw it, I just had to grab it, even if I paid just a little bit too much for it. But another exceptional pour, a lot of oakiness. You need to like the oak on this one, you know, that kind of nutty oakiness. But if you're into that, you're gonna love this pour.